He was running through the crowded terminal, sweat dripping down his neck, clutching a boarding pass like it was a winning lottery ticket. This flight wasn't just about a job, it was about his wife's life. The company he was interviewing with had real insurance, real benefits, and without it, his wife's medication was slipping further and further out of reach. But then, right as the gate came into sight, he saw her. An older woman, frail, clutching her chest, her cane clattering against the tile. People moved away like she was contagious, eyes darting, but feet frozen. A teenager lifted his phone to record, and in that instant, he had to choose the gate, or her. Derek Cole didn't even think. His EMT training kicked in. His knees slammed to the floor, and suddenly he was holding her trembling hand, whispering, "Stay with me, ma'am. Just breathe. You're not alone." Her pulse was faint, her eyes cloudy, but she locked onto him like she was trying to say something only he could hear. By the time the paramedics arrived and wheeled her away, the gate was closed, the plane gone. He just sat there, boarding pass crushed in his fist, watching the jet bridge roll back like a door slamming on his last chance. That night in the cramped apartment he shared with his wife Lena, he lied. When she asked if he made the flight, he said it was delayed. He told her he was still waiting at the gate, as if saying it out loud could make it true. But she wasn't fooled, not really. She coughed so hard she nearly collapsed, then looked at him with those tired eyes and whispered, "Whatever happens, Derek, I know you did the right thing. You always do." And that hurt worse than any rejection email could. The days after were a blur of exhaustion. He picked up day jobs at the bus terminal, hauling crates that cut into his hands. And when those ended, he found shifts at warehouses, construction sites, anywhere someone would pay cash. Every dollar went to the pharmacy. Every morning before walking home, he'd count out wrinkled bills, buy the cheapest inhaler he could, and carry it home like treasure. He'd set it on the nightstand beside Lena, kiss her forehead, and smile like nothing was breaking inside him. Weeks later, he saw her again, the woman from the airport. She was sitting on a sagging porch in his neighborhood, a scarf around her head, her cane propped beside her. He almost didn't believe it. "You're the lady from the airport," he said, stopping in his tracks. She smiled, her voice steadier than before. "Yes, dear. And you're the young man who saved me. I never got to thank you." She told him her name was Margaret Wilson, said she was staying with her niece nearby. He introduced himself, Derek Miller, and brushed it off like it was nothing. "I'm just glad you're okay," he said. But Margaret studied him, her sharp old eyes catching the shadows under his, the way his shoulders sagged, the bag of medicine he carried, like it weighed 100 pounds. From then on, their paths kept crossing. He helped her with groceries one evening when her arms shook too much to hold the bags. She thanked him with a softness that almost made him uncomfortable. And though he always smiled, always waved it off, she noticed. She noticed his worn shoes, his hollowed eyes, the way his shirts hung looser every week. She noticed how he never talked about himself, only about Lena, about making sure she had what she needed. One rainy night, there was a knock at his door. Margaret stood there, damp scarf clinging to her head, holding a paper bag. "I brought bread and soup," she said quietly, "to thank you." Derek almost told her no, but something in her eyes stopped him. He let her in. She met Lena, saw the coughs, the pale face, the way Derek moved. Instantly, steady hands, quick reflexes, pressing an inhaler to her lips, whispering gently, "Slow down, sweetheart. Breathe with me." Margaret watched him silent. She realized his kindness at the airport wasn't luck. It was who he was. And then she disappeared. Weeks passed. Derek figured maybe she'd gone back to wherever she came from. He didn't think about it much. He was too busy working himself to the bone just to keep Lena alive. Until one morning an envelope slid under his door. Inside, a card with elegant letterhead. "Mr. Miller, I would like to offer you an interview opportunity. Please meet me at Monarch Air Headquarters, Friday at 10:00 a.m. M. Wilson, CEO. He froze. Monarch Air, the same company he'd missed that flight for. The same company whose email had crushed him. He showed it to Lena, who gasped, her eyes wide with hope. Do you think it's real? She whispered. He didn't know. But they had nothing left to lose. Friday morning, they walked into a glass tower that seemed to scrape the sky. The receptionist led them to a wood-paneled office that smelled faintly of leather and polish. And there she was, Margaret Wilson. Except she wasn't frail now. She stood tall, commanding. "My name is Margaret Bradford," she said, her voice steady. "I co-founded Monarch Air 30 years ago. And Derek, you saved my life." His knees nearly buckled. You're the CEO?" She nodded, her eyes warm but firm. "At the airport, I wanted to know if your kindness was circumstance or character. So I stayed close, watched how you lived. And what I saw convinced me. You didn't just help me once. You've been helping people your whole life." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an offer, Director of Community Outreach. Full benefits. Insurance. Coverage for Lena's condition. A salary that could finally lift them out of survival mode. Lena's hand covered her mouth, tears spilling. Derek just stared, throat too tight to speak. Margaret leaned forward. "This isn't charity. This is leadership. We want someone who understands struggle, who can connect with families like yours. You've already proven you can do that. Now we want to give you the tools to do it on a bigger scale." 6 months later, Derek stood at a podium in a crisp suit, speaking to a courtyard full of families, nurses, and volunteers. His voice was clear, steady, filled with something he thought he'd lost hope. He talked about dignity, about second chances, about how no one should have to choose between rent and medicine. And in the front row sat Lena, her breathing easy for the first time in years, smiling through tears. Beside her sat Margaret, beaming like a proud grandmother. When the applause roared, Margaret took the mic. "6 months ago, I had what doctors called a widowmaker heart attack in an airport terminal. This man, Derek, gave up his own future to save mine. He missed a flight that was supposed to change his life. What he didn't miss was the chance to show us all what real leadership looks like. Not the kind in a boardroom, but the kind that kneels on a dirty floor to hold a stranger's hand." Then she turned to him, eyes glinting. "That's why this program will now be known as the Derek Miller model, expanded across 12 cities. The crowd erupted. Lena clutched his hand, and Derek just stood there in disbelief, his name printed on the banner behind them. Later, when things had quieted, Margaret asked him softly, "What would you have said in that interview if you'd made it?" He thought for a long moment, then smiled. "I was going to tell them that airlines can be more than transportation companies. They can be neighbors, partners. They can help people build better lives, not just get to their destinations." Margaret laughed, full and genuine. "Well, she said I'd say you finally got to give that answer." And as Derek looked out at the courtyard, at families finding hope, at his wife breathing easy, at a future he thought he'd lost, he realized something. Sometimes the flight you miss is the one that takes you exactly where you're meant to be. Now I've got to ask you, was Derek right to risk it all for a stranger, or should he have chosen his wife's only chance? Would you have missed that flight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this isn't just his story. It's about all of us and the choices that define who we really are. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because stories like this, they're meant to be told.